Two companies are building India's future in chips, and they could not have picked more opposite ways to do it. One is Indian, betting $11 billion to make the wafer itself, the single hardest thing in this entire industry. The other is American, and it's doing the exact opposite, skipping the wafer completely and finishing chips it makes somewhere else. One is building a capability India never had. The other is renting India a seat in a chain it already runs. Tata versus Micron isn't just two factories, it's two entire theories of how a country breaks into semiconductors. So which road actually works? Let's break down the showdown. To see why these roads diverge, you have to split a chip's life into two halves. The front end is the fab, turning a blank silicon wafer into circuits, layer by microscopic layer. It's the most capital-intensive, highest yield risk, most jealously guarded step in all of manufacturing, and the one almost no country masters. The back end is everything after, cutting that wafer into individual chips, packaging them, and testing them. Engineers call it OSAT, or ATMP. It's far cheaper to enter, it employs more people per dollar, and, increasingly, it's where a lot of a chip's real performance now comes from. Every nation trying to break in faces the same fork: attempt the brutal front end, or start with the back end and climb. Tata took one road, Micron took the other, and that contrast tells you almost everything about how India's chip industry is actually being built. So why are both bets happening right now in the same handful of years? Because India finally has the two things that make either road possible: money and a reason. The government's India semiconductor mission will cover up to half the cost of an approved plant, a subsidy big enough to change the math on a fab or a packaging line. And the world suddenly wants what India is selling: a chip base that isn't Taiwan and isn't China. Every major customer is hunting for a China plus one, somewhere to make chips that sidesteps the Taiwan risk and the US-China crossfire. India, with its enormous engineering workforce and its alignment with the West, is the obvious candidate. But here's the catch that splits our two companies. The front end, the fab, is the strategic prize, the step that actually moves a country up the value chain. The back end is the realistic entry point: cheaper, faster, lower risk. Tata reached straight for the prize. Micron took the entry. Both are completely rational. They're just answering a different question: how much risk should India take, and how fast? Start with Tata, because it chose the hard road on purpose. Tata Electronics is building India's first real wafer fab in Dholera, Gujarat, a roughly $11 billion, 300-millimeter plant designed to make 50,000 wafers a month, with first silicon targeted for late 2026. And it isn't stopping at the fab. Tata is also standing up a giant packaging site in Assam, built to handle tens of millions of chips a day. In other words, Tata is trying to own the entire stack, front end and back end, in one move. That is wildly ambitious for a company that has never run a fab. So how does it skip decades of learning? Two outside crutches. The process know-how comes from Taiwan's power chip, PSMC, which is transferring the thousands of tuned recipes that turn sand into working chips at high yield. The tools come from ASML, the Dutch near monopoly on advanced lithography. Tata's bet is national, not just commercial. Build a sovereign capability India simply did not have, and absorb the know-how while outsiders are still willing to hand it over. The upside is enormous: a real domestic fab. The risk is just as big: first-time operators, brutal yield ramps, and a manufacturing workforce trained from scratch. Now Micron, which looked at the same opportunity and did almost the opposite. Micron is an American memory giant. It makes DRAM and flash. It did not build a fab in India. Its wafers are still made in the US, Taiwan, and Japan. What Micron built in Sanand, Gujarat, is a back-end plant, a roughly $2.75 billion facility that takes those finished wafers and assembles, packages, and tests them into chips ready to ship. And unlike Tata's fab, it's already running. It reached commercial production in early 2026, and memory packaged in India now ships worldwide. Micron's logic is pure supply chain. It isn't trying to give India a fab. It's extending its own global chain into a new, lower-cost, politically friendly location, with up to half the bill covered by Indian subsidies. It's fast, it's far lower risk, and it leans on capabilities Micron already has, rather than ones India has to invent. The trade-off is what India gets out of it. A Micron packaging plant brings jobs, exports, and credibility, proof that India can be a reliable node in the global chain today. But the crown jewel step, the wafer itself, stays outside the country. India is renting capacity, not building it. So what does each road actually buy India? Tata buys sovereignty, the ability, eventually, to make a wafer on Indian soil without asking anyone's permission. That's the prize that changes a country's place in the world. But it's a decade-plus marathon, and it may not hit profitable yield for years. Micron buys momentum, real chips, real exports, real factory jobs today, and it proves to every other company that India works. The catch is that India stays a back end, finishing other people's wafers. Now here's the tell, and it's the most revealing fact in the whole story. Of the semiconductor projects India has approved so far, only 2 are wafer fabs. Almost all the rest are packaging and test. The entire wave of companies following these 2 in, names like Keynes in the CG Power Renesas venture, chose Micron's road, not Tata's. That's the market voting in real time. It's telling you which road India can realistically walk this decade, and just how lonely and how hard Tata's road actually is. One company reached for the prize. Almost everyone else took the safer entrance. So who wins the showdown? Both, but on completely different clocks, and the smartest reading is on neither company's press release. Micron wins the present. Its model is fast, low risk, already shipping, and the real proof, it's the model almost everyone else is copying. If you want to know how India's chip industry actually grows over the next 5 years, watch the back end, because that's where the volume, the jobs, and the realistic wins are. Tata wins the future, if it wins at all. A working domestic fab is the thing that genuinely moves India up the chain, and the fact that PSMC will hand over process recipes and ASML will hand over tools tells you the world has decided to bet on India. But it's the riskier road by far, and so far no one is brave enough to build a second fab beside it. The deeper winner, though, is on neither slide. The equipment and materials suppliers who sell into a fab and a packaging line alike, and the Indian engineers being trained on both. A manufacturing workforce that didn't exist a few years ago. So don't watch the ribbon cuttings. Watch 2 things: whether Tata hits real yield and whether Micron ever does more in India than package. The day Micron makes a wafer here is the day India stops renting and starts owning. If you want the real economics behind the chip industry, who builds what, who depends on whom, and who actually profits when a country breaks in, this channel takes it apart one piece at a time. No hype, no hot takes, just how the silicon really gets made, and made to pay. Subscribe if that's the version you want, and stick around, because the moves that decide this industry aren't the flashy ones at the bleeding edge. They're the patient, brutally hard bets underneath, where the whole game is actually won. Thanks for watching.